The morning of my surgery, everything seemed normal. David kissed me goodbye in the pre-op room, his familiar scent of sandalwood and coffee providing comfort as the nurses prepped me for the procedure that would remove the tumor wrapped around my spine. 6 hours of delicate surgery that would determine whether I'd walk again, or worse. "I've got everything handled," he assured me, squeezing my hand. "Just focus on healing." After 15 years of marriage, I trusted him completely. David had always managed our finances meticulously. Investments, retirement accounts, our joint savings from my work as a physical therapist and his as an IT consultant. When he'd insisted on getting power of attorney before my surgery, just in case of complications, it had seemed like typical David. Cautious, prepared, responsible. I'd signed without hesitation. Now, as the anesthesiologist injected something into my IV that made the ceiling swim, David's face blurred above me. His last words followed me into unconsciousness. "Love you, Sarah. Everything's going to be fine." When I woke in recovery, groggy and disoriented, my first clear thought was gratitude that I could feel my toes. The surgeon appeared at my bedside, explaining that they'd successfully removed the entire tumor. Recovery would be long and painful, but the prognosis was excellent. "Where's David?" I asked, my voice sandpaper rough. The surgeon exchanged glances with a nurse. "Your husband stepped out a while ago. I'm sure he'll be back soon." But David didn't return that evening or the next morning. My calls went straight to voicemail. By the second day post-surgery, worry had eclipsed the pain of my incision. My sister Jen arrived from Chicago, her face tight with concern. "Have you heard anything?" I whispered. "Nothing. Something must have happened to him. An accident, maybe? Can you call the police?" Jen hesitated, then pulled a chair close to my bed. "Sarah, there's something you need to know. I didn't want to tell you right after surgery, but just tell me," I interrupted, ice crystallizing in my stomach. "I got a call from Mark at the bank yesterday. He was trying to reach you." Jen took my hand. "There was a large transfer from your joint accounts. Actually, all your joint accounts. Mark flagged it because it was unusual activity." "How large?" The room seemed to tilt sideways. "All of it, Sarah. Your savings, retirement, everything. Almost $742,000. The monitor beside my bed beeped as my heart rate spiked. "That's impossible. Where would it go? David would never—" The transfer was to an account belonging to someone named Veronica Lawson. The name hit me like a physical blow. Veronica, David's coworker who'd started at his company 8 months ago. Attractive, single, 15 years younger than his 45. He'd mentioned her frequently at first, then stopped altogether when I'd teased him about his work crush. "There must be a mistake," I insisted, though even as the words left my mouth, pieces were clicking into terrible place. David's recent late nights, the business trip to Boston that had seemed unnecessary, the password changes on his phone. "Mark froze the accounts as soon as he saw the transfer," Jen continued. "But Sarah, David used the power of attorney you signed. He came into the bank the morning of your surgery, right after he left you." I closed my eyes, trying to slow my breathing. The tumor removal suddenly seemed secondary to this new, unexpected surgery. The abrupt excision of my husband from my life, taking with him our financial security and 15 years of trust. Has anyone gone to the house?" Jen's silence answered before her words did. "I went by this morning. Most of his clothes are gone. His passport, too. Of course. The practical preparations of a man who'd planned his exit meticulously. Just like he'd planned our finances. Or so I'd thought." "The police?" I asked numbly. "They took a report, but said it's complicated because you signed the power of attorney, and technically, he had legal access to those joint accounts." I stared at the ceiling, my surgical pain now competing with a deeper anguish. David hadn't just left me. He'd calculated his departure to coincide with the moment of my greatest vulnerability. Had he been planning this all along? Was anything about our marriage real? "There's one more thing," Jen said, squeezing my hand. "Mark wants to meet with you as soon as you're well enough. He said there might be something he can do." It was the smallest spark of possibility in the darkness that had suddenly engulfed my life. What could a bank manager possibly do about a husband who'd legally, if unethically, emptied our accounts? I didn't know, but in that moment of devastating betrayal, even the faintest hope felt like oxygen to a drowning woman. "Tell him I'll meet as soon as I'm discharged," I said, turning my face toward the window so Jen wouldn't see my tears. Outside, life continued normally. People walking, cars passing, clouds drifting across the spring sky. How strange that the world didn't acknowledge that everything had changed. My body was healing from one surgery while my life was hemorrhaging from another. And somewhere out there, the man I'd trusted with both my heart and finances was starting a new life with a woman named Veronica, funded by 15 years of our shared dreams. As the nurse came in to check my vitals, I made a silent vow. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. 4 days after my world imploded, I was discharged from the hospital with a back brace, prescription pain medication, and the crushing weight of betrayal. Jen insisted I stay with her rather than return to the empty house David and I had shared. "We need to meet with Mark today," she said as she helped me settle onto her couch. "He's been calling daily for updates on your condition." Mark Tanner had been our bank manager at First Regional for nearly a decade. Unlike most banking relationships in this digital age, ours was personal. Holiday cards exchanged, occasional dinners with his wife Lisa, genuine interest in each other's lives beyond transactions. David had sometimes complained that Mark was too old-fashioned, preferring to handle matters in person rather than online. Now, I saw that old-fashioned quality in a new light. "He said he could come here," Jen added, "considering your condition." 2 hours later, Mark arrived, his normally cheerful face solemn as he took in my surgical brace and the evident shock still etched on my features. He carried a briefcase and a potted orchid. "I'm so sorry about everything, Sarah," he said, setting the flower on the coffee table. "Both your health situation and the other matter." "Just tell me if there's anything you can do," I replied, skipping the pleasantries. "Jen said you thought there might be options." Mark settled into an armchair, placing his briefcase across his knees. "Yes, there are several things to discuss." He extracted a folder of documents. "First, I should explain exactly what happened with your accounts." He spread several papers on the coffee table within my view. Banking records, transaction receipts, account statements. "On the morning of your surgery at 8:47 a.m., David entered our main branch and presented the power of attorney document. He requested a series of transfers from your joint accounts, as well as your individual retirement account to which the POA gave him access." The precision of the timestamp made me flinch. I'd been on the operating table by then, completely vulnerable, while David had been systematically dismantling our financial life. Amanda Chen was the teller who processed the initial request. When she saw the size of the transfers, she flagged it for review and called me. "This is standard procedure for transactions over certain amounts." "But you approved it," I said flatly. It wasn't a question. Mark's expression tightened. "I questioned David about the transfers. He explained that he was consolidating your accounts into a new high-yield opportunity that required immediate funding, especially with medical expenses looming. The power of attorney was properly executed, notarized, and on file with us. Legally, my hands appeared tied." "Appeared?" Jen caught the nuance immediately. Mark nodded. "I've known you and David for 10 years. Something felt wrong about the urgency and the comprehensive nature of the withdrawals. So while I did authorize the transfers, I had to, given the documentation, I placed a 72-hour administrative hold on the receiving account." Hope flickered faintly. What does that mean exactly? It means that while the funds left your accounts, they've been frozen in the receiving account, Veronica Lawson's account, for a 3-day review period. This is a provision we can invoke for unusual large transfers as a fraud prevention measure. My breath caught. So the money hasn't actually gone anywhere yet? Correct. Ms. Lawson can see the deposit in her account but cannot access or move the funds until the hold expires. Mark checked his watch, which would be tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The room suddenly seemed brighter, oxygen flowing more freely into my lungs. Can you extend the hold? Not without cause. But that brings me to my second point. Mark extracted another document from his briefcase. Our fraud department discovered something interesting about the power of attorney. Document David presented. He handed me a copy of the POA I'd signed. It looked identical to what I remembered, my signature clear at the bottom, notarization stamp in the corner. Look at the date of Power's activation, Mark directed. I scanned the legal jargon until I found it. These powers shall take effect immediately upon the incapacitation of the principal as determined by... My voice trailed off as understanding dawned. The POA you signed was a springing power of attorney, Mark explained. It only became effective if you were declared incapacitated, unable to make your own financial decisions due to your medical condition. But Sarah, despite your surgery, you were never legally declared incapacitated. Jen leaned forward. So he didn't actually have authority to make those transfers. Precisely. Mark's expression was grim, but satisfied. David misrepresented the status of the POA when he initiated the transfers. That constitutes bank fraud. The implications washed over me in a dizzying wave. So you can reverse the transfers? Get the money back? With your authorization, yes. I brought the paperwork to initiate that process. He slid several forms toward me. We'll need to file fraud charges as well. I stared at the documents, emotions colliding in my chest. Filing fraud charges meant formally acknowledging David's betrayal, crystallizing into legal records what still felt surreally nightmarish. It meant accepting that my husband had not only abandoned me during a life-threatening medical crisis, but had attempted to steal our life savings in the process. There's something else you should know, Mark added, his voice gentler. After flagging this situation, I took the liberty of checking if David had accessed your safe deposit box. My heart sank. The safe deposit box contained our most precious possessions, family jewelry including my grandmother's antique diamond ring, birth certificates, property deeds, and an emergency cash reserve of $25,000. He cleaned it out 2 days before your surgery, Mark confirmed. Everything except the property deeds, which he couldn't easily liquidate. The calculated nature of David's betrayal took my breath away. This was no impulsive decision, no heat-of-the-moment life crisis. He had methodically planned each step, timing it precisely around my surgery, preparing his escape for weeks, if not months. If we file the fraud charges, Jen asked, what happens to David? Mark's expression hardened. Bank fraud is a federal offense. It carries significant penalties, including potential prison time. At minimum, it would create an investigative trail that could help recover any assets he's already taken, like the contents of the safe deposit box. Prison. The thought of David, who complained about the discomfort of economy airline seats and insisted on specific thread counts for our bed sheets, in a prison cell should have brought some satisfaction. Instead, it only deepened my shock. How had I missed the true nature of the man I'd shared my life with? You need to decide quickly, Mark urged gently. The administrative hold expires tomorrow morning. Once those funds are released to Ms. Lawson's, recovering them becomes much more complicated. I reached for the forms with a trembling hand. This single signature would not only reclaim my financial future, but would set in motion legal machinery that would forever change the ending of the story of David and Sarah Mitchell. 15 years of marriage would conclude not with divorce papers, but with fraud charges. Do you have a pen? I asked Mark, my voice steadier than I expected. As I signed my name, I realized David had miscalculated in one critical way. He'd assumed my incapacitation would be complete, physical, mental, and emotional. He'd underestimated both my resilience and the human connections I'd formed while he'd apparently been plotting his exit. Mark gathered the signed documents carefully. "I'll file these immediately. The funds should be restored to a new, secure account in your name only by tomorrow afternoon." "Thank you," I said, meaning it more deeply than those simple words could convey. "But there's still one thing I don't understand. Why did you go to such lengths to help me? You could have simply followed protocol." Mark closed his briefcase before answering. 3 years ago, my sister went through something similar. Her husband emptied their accounts while she was battling cancer. Her bank didn't question it. She lost everything. He met my eyes directly. I promised myself I'd never let that happen to anyone else if I could help it. As he left, I felt the first stirring of something beyond shock and betrayal, a reminder that while one relationship had revealed itself to be a devastating facade, other connections, even those I'd considered peripheral, contained surprising depths of humanity. Money would be returned, but the harder recovery of my trust, my confidence, my belief in my own judgment was only beginning. That evening, as Jen prepared dinner, my phone rang. David's mother's name flashed on the screen. My heart lurched. David had kept his mother's phone after she passed 2 years ago, unable to disconnect that final link. I'd found it sentimental. Now it seemed like yet another calculated tool. I answered on speaker so Jen could hear. "Sarah?" David's voice, simultaneously achingly familiar and now strangely foreign. "Don't hang up, please." I said nothing, my throat constricting. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But there's more to this than you understand." His voice had that persuasive tone he'd used in countless minor disagreements over the years. The voice that gently suggested I might not have all the facts, that his perspective was the more rational one. "You took everything while I was in surgery," I finally managed, each word precise and contained. "What exactly am I misunderstanding?" "I needed to protect our assets. There are people after me, dangerous people. I had to move quickly, create distance." Jen and I exchanged incredulous glances. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was descending into farce. "Dangerous people?" I repeated flatly. "Related to your IT consulting work? Or to Veronica?" A pause. "You know about Veronica. I know you bought 2 tickets to Cancun. I know you emptied our safe deposit box. I know you calculated exactly when I'd be unconscious and unable to stop your transfers." My voice grew steadier with each fact. "What I don't know is how long. You've been planning this." "Sarah, listen. The bank reversed the transfers, David." The silence on the other end was deeply satisfying. "Every dollar. And the police are looking for you. Bank fraud during a medical emergency doesn't play well with authorities." His breathing changed, faster and shallow. "You involved the police? Sarah, you don't understand what you've done." "I understand perfectly. You committed fraud. You abandoned me during life-threatening surgery. You stole from me." "I can explain everything," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Not over the phone. I need to see you, tomorrow at the house. Just you. No police, no sister." Warning. Bells rang in my mind. Why would I ever agree to that? "Because I have your grandmother's ring and your mother's locket. Things I know matter to you beyond their monetary value." His voice hardened slightly. "Things you'll never see again, unless you meet me alone." The naked manipulation stunned me. This was a side of David I'd never witnessed. Calculating, cold, willing to weaponize 15 years of intimate knowledge about what I valued most. 3 o'clock, I said finally. "That's all you get." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking. "You're not seriously considering meeting him alone," Jen said immediately. "Of course not. I reached for my phone again. "I'm calling Detective Larson. David just made their job much easier by announcing exactly where he'll be tomorrow." As I relayed the conversation to the detective, who promised to coordinate an arrest plan, I found myself wondering about David's claim of dangerous people. It seemed like an obvious lie, a desperate attempt to justify his actions. Yet something in his voice had carried genuine fear. Was it merely the fear of consequences finally catching up to him? Or was there something more to this bizarre situation than a midlife affair and financial theft? I'd find out tomorrow, I realized. One way or another, I would come face to face with the stranger who had been my husband, and perhaps finally understand how 15 years of shared life could evaporate during 6 hours of surgery. The next morning, I woke early after a restless night. Detective Larson called to confirm the plan. Officers would be stationed around our house, watching all exits. I would wear a wire and keep David talking in the front room until I had confirmation about the jewelry, particularly my grandmother's ring. If at any point I felt unsafe, I would use the code word headache and they would immediately enter. Jen drove me to the house at 2:30, squeezing my hand before I got out. "Be careful. If he seems unstable, just get out of there." "I will," I promised. "Stay on your phone. I'll text you when it's over." Standing in the driveway of what had been our home just a week earlier, I felt like an intruder in my own life. The familiar craftsman-style house with its slate blue paint and white trim appeared unchanged, oblivious to the seismic shifts in its occupants' reality. "Remember the plan," Detective Larson said from the unmarked car where she sat with her partner. "We have officers positioned at all exit points. Let him come to you in the front room. Keep him talking. If you feel unsafe at any point, use the code word, and we'll enter immediately." I nodded, adjusting my back brace beneath my loose sweater. The surgical pain had subsided to a dull throb under medication, but the brace was non-negotiable for at least another 3 weeks. "And the wire?" I confirmed, touching the small transmitter, clipped inside my sweater pocket. "Working perfectly. We'll hear everything." She handed me the new house key the locksmith had provided. "Good luck, Mrs. Mitchell." "Just Sarah," I corrected automatically. The Mrs. Mitchell identity felt like a costume I'd unwittingly worn in someone else's play. Walking up the familiar path to my front door required more courage than I'd anticipated, not because of David or potential danger, but because crossing that threshold meant confronting the physical space where my marriage had lived and died. Inside, the house was unnervingly normal. The same furniture, artwork, even the coffee mug David had left in the sink the morning of my surgery. I moved to the living room as instructed, taking a seat that gave me clear sight lines to both the front door and the kitchen entrance. At precisely 3 odd, I heard a key in the back door. David still had his copy, of course. Footsteps approached through the kitchen, and then he appeared in the doorway. My first thought was that he looked terrible. The always impeccable David appeared rumpled and exhausted, dark circles beneath. His eyes, his normally close-trimmed beard showing several days' growth. He wore jeans and a wrinkled button-down I didn't recognize. "Sarah," he said, relief evident in his voice. "You came alone, as requested." I kept my expression neutral, fighting the surreal dissonance of this encounter. 1 week ago, this man had been my husband, my partner, my future. Now he was essentially a stranger and, according to the authorities, a criminal. He stepped further into the room but maintained distance, perching on the arm of the sofa rather than approaching me. Directly, his eyes tracked over my body, lingering on where he knew the surgical brace would be. "How are you feeling after the surgery?" The genuine concern in his voice was jarring given the circumstances. "They got the entire tumor. I'll need physical therapy, but the prognosis is good." He nodded, eyes dropping to his hands. "I'm glad. That's really good news." The absurdity of this exchange, his professed concern for my health while having abandoned me during surgery, fueled a sudden surge of anger. "Where's my grandmother's ring, David?" And my mother's locket. You said you had them. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. Here. I never intended to keep them. I know what they mean to you. He placed the pouch on the coffee table and slid it toward me. I didn't reach for it immediately, wary of any closer contact. Why? David. The question encompassed everything. The theft, Veronica, his disappearance during my most vulnerable moment. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. It's complicated. Try me. I think I've earned an explanation. His eyes met mine, then darted away. I made some mistakes, bad investments, debts I couldn't tell you about. How much? I asked. He swallowed visibly. Almost $300,000. The figure jolted me. How is that possible? I monitor our credit cards, our accounts. Not under my name. His voice dropped. I have another identity, another social security number. It started as a protection measure for cybersecurity work, but then you used it to hide debts from me, I finished. The betrayal expanding into new territories. What kind of debts? It started with an investment opportunity. High risk, high reward. My colleague Victor brought me in. We lost everything, but the investors weren't traditional lenders. Understanding dawned. Loan sharks? Seriously? He nodded, miserably. They started threatening me 3 months ago. Then they mentioned you. Described your routines, where you went for coffee, which patients you saw on Tuesdays. It was a clear message. And your solution was to steal our life savings rather than come to me or go to the police? My voice rose. Despite my intention to remain calm. These aren't people the police can easily touch, he insisted. And I couldn't put you at risk by telling you. The plan was to pay them off, disappear for a while until things cooled down, then reach out once. You'd recovered from surgery? It sounded rehearsed, a convenient narrative to justify unconscionable actions. But something still didn't add up. And Veronica? Where does she fit into this protection plan? His expression shifted, guilt flickering across his features. She works in cybersecurity. She helped create the extraction plan, new identities, untraceable fund movements. Don't lie to me, David. Not now. The tickets to Cancun weren't about hiding from loan sharks. He looked away. It became complicated. We got close while planning the exit strategy. How close? I pressed, needing to hear him say it. We've been seeing each other for about 4 months, he admitted. It wasn't planned. It just happened. 4 months. The timeline aligned perfectly with my diagnosis. The discovery of the tumor, the increasing anxiety about my health and future. While I'd been grappling with my mortality, my husband had been finding comfort elsewhere. So, let me understand clearly, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You got into debt with dangerous lenders. Instead of coming to me, you started an affair with a woman who helped you plan to steal our life savings. You executed this plan while I was in surgery, then fled with her to Mexico. But now you're back because the money never arrived, he said simply. The transfer to Veronica's account showed as pending, then disappeared entirely. She panicked, thought I'd double-crossed her and left me at the Cancun airport. Despite everything, a bubble of laughter escaped me. The absurd image of David abandoned in Mexico by his partner in crime after my financial murder had failed. His expression darkened. It's not funny, Sarah. These people have already come looking for me. When they realize I can't pay them, then turn yourself in, I suggested. Protective custody. Witness protection. If these people are as dangerous as you claim, it's not that simple. There are complications. Like bank fraud charges, I suggested, or abandoning your wife during emergency surgery. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know how it looks. But I swear, Sarah, everything I did was to protect us both. The money was just a temporary measure until the situation resolved. Temporary? I repeated incredulously. You emptied every account we had. Because leaving anything would have created a trail. His composure cracked slightly. These people are connected, with access to banking information. Any transfers between our known accounts would have been flagged. It had to be all or nothing to create the illusion we disappeared completely. His explanation had a certain twisted logic, but years of marriage had taught me David's tells when he wasn't sharing the whole truth. The slight clench in his jaw, the too deliberate eye contact. He was still withholding something significant. Who exactly did you borrow from, David? What aren't you telling me? Before he could answer, the unmistakable sound of a car braking hard came from outside. David's head snapped toward the window, panic replacing the calculated control he'd been maintaining. Did you call the police? He demanded, moving quickly to peek through the curtains. Damn it, Sarah! I told you to come alone. Did you really expect me to meet privately with the man who cleaned out our accounts and abandoned me during surgery? I countered, rising carefully from my chair. Of course I called the police. His face transformed with a cold fury I'd never witnessed in 15 years together. You have no idea what you've done. Rapid footsteps approached the front door, but they weren't the measured pace of Detective Larson and her partner. The door burst open with a splintering crack as the jam gave way. Two men I'd never seen before entered, one tall and angular, the other stocky with a shaved head. Both wore dark clothing and impassive expressions that chilled me more than overt. Menace would have. Mitchell. The taller one acknowledged David with a slight nod. We've been looking for you. David's face had drained of color. Alexei, I can explain everything. There was a banking complication, but I'm resolving it. The man called Alexei surveyed the room, his gaze calculating as it landed on me. Is this the wife? The one with the convenient surgery? The casual reference to my medical crisis made my blood run cold. These men knew about my surgery, had factored it into whatever arrangement they had with David. She's not involved, David said quickly. This is between us. On the contrary, Alexei replied, his accent faintly Eastern European. She became involved the moment you used her medical situation as your opportunity. Rather cold, don't you? Think? An understanding crashed over me with sickening clarity. David hadn't been trying to protect me from loan sharks. He'd been working with them, using my surgery as the perfect cover for a massive financial theft, with or without their direct involvement. I instinctively reached for my pocket, ready to use the code word that would bring in the police waiting outside. But before I could speak, a third figure appeared in the doorway behind the intruders. Detective Larson, gun drawn. Police, hands where I can see them. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The stocky man pivoted with surprising speed, reaching inside his jacket. Detective Larson fired a single shot. The man crumpled to the floor as his partner raised his hands. David lunged toward me. Whether to protect me or use me as a shield, I'll never know. Additional officers flooded in from both entrances, securing Alexei while checking his fallen companion. Detective Larson approached me, her weapon still drawn but now pointed. Downward. Are you hurt, Sarah? I shook my head mutely, shock rendering me temporarily speechless. Across the room, David was being handcuffed by another officer, his expression a mixture of fear and resignation. Sarah! He called desperately as they began to lead him out. It wasn't what you think. I can explain everything. Sarah, please. As they guided him past me toward the door, I found my voice. One question, David. Just one. Was any of it real? Us? Our marriage? 15 years together? He met my eyes for a long moment before answering. Parts of it. More than you'd believe. Right now. Then he was gone, escorted to a waiting police car alongside Alexei. The stocky man was being attended to by paramedics, alive but wounded. Detective Larson guided me to sit down, recognizing the signs of shock. It's over now. You're safe. But as I watched the activity swirling around what had once been my peaceful living room, I knew this was far from over. David's cryptic parting words, the mysterious men, the web of deception stretching back months or possibly years. All of it suggested that this was merely the first chapter in a story far more complex than a simple case of marital betrayal and theft. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of police statements, crime scene technicians, and the surreal experience of watching my home become evidence in multiple criminal investigations. Detective Larson arranged for me to stay at a hotel rather than return to Jen's apartment, concerned that if David's associates had known my routines, they might know my sister's address as well. "We're still piecing things together," she explained, as we sat in the hotel restaurant the morning after the confrontation. "But certain aspects are becoming clearer." She opened a folder, careful to angle it away from other diners. Inside was a photo of the man called Alexei. Alex Volov, Russian national with connections to a sophisticated cybercrime organization on our radar for years, but elusive. Your husband appears to have been working with him for at least 18 months. The timeline caught me off guard. 18 months? That's well before my diagnosis, before any of this started. Detective Larson nodded. "We believe your husband's involvement began as legitimate cybersecurity consulting, helping them shore up vulnerabilities in their own systems, but evolved into something deeper. The financial transactions we've uncovered suggest he crossed ethical lines approximately 8 months ago. 8 months ago, around the time our conversations about starting a family had intensified. I'd thought David's increasing work hours and stress were related to the fertility discussions we'd been having. Now I wondered if he'd already been plotting his exit while I'd been researching prenatal vitamins. What exactly was he doing for them?" I asked. "Your husband has specialized skills in identity creation and verification systems. These organizations need ways to create seemingly legitimate identities for money laundering, to open bank accounts, establish credit lines." She tapped the folder. "Based on evidence seized from your home office, he appears to have been creating entire digital lives, complete with fabricated history, credentials, and documentation. And Veronica? Veronica Lawson is an alias. Her real name is Katerina Petrova." Detective Larson showed me another photo, the woman I'd glimpsed occasionally at David's company functions, smiling next to my husband. "She's a known associate of Volov's organization, likely placed in your husband's company to recruit him. The romantic relationship may have been strategic from her end." The revelation twisted the knife of betrayal even deeper. Not only had David been cheating on me, but his affair partner might have been manipulating him from the beginning, which somehow made his betrayal both worse and slightly more comprehensible. "Where is she now?" "We're tracking her. The Mexican authorities confirmed she departed Cancun the day after your husband returned to the U.S., but her current whereabouts are unknown." As Detective Larson continued outlining the investigation's progress, my mind struggled to reconcile the David I'd known. The man who remembered every anniversary, who nursed me through pneumonia 3 years ago, who cried at sad movies despite his protestations otherwise, with this shadow figure who created false identities for criminals and planned to abandon his wife during life-altering surgery. "What happens next?" I asked finally. "Your husband is being held without bail, charged with bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and potentially more as we uncover additional evidence. Volov is also in custody, facing numerous federal charges. Their cooperation could prove valuable in dismantling larger networks. And me? Am I in danger?" Detective Larson's hesitation spoke volumes. "We believe the most immediate threat has been neutralized with these arrests. However, these organizations have long memories and extensive networks. Until we better understand the full scope of your husband's involvement, we're recommending continued caution." "What does that mean, practically?" "Enhanced security at whatever residence you choose. Regular check-ins with our department. Potentially some lifestyle adjustments until the case concludes." "Lifestyle adjustments. a clinical term for upending an already shattered life. After Detective Larson left, I sat alone in the hotel restaurant, watching normal people having normal days. Business meetings, family vacations, romantic breakfasts, while my reality had transformed into something unrecognizable. My phone buzzed with a text from Jen checking in. I replied with reassurances I didn't feel. As I was preparing to return to my room, the hostess approached with a small envelope. "This was left for you at the front desk, Miss Mitchell." Inside was a key card for a room in the same hotel and a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Room 847, 2 p.m. Come alone. Information about David you need to know. A friend." Every instinct warned against this meeting, but curiosity and the desperate need for answers outweighed caution. I considered calling Detective Larson but hesitated. What if this friend had legitimate information that might disappear once police became involved? After an hour of internal debate, I decided on a compromise. I would go, but I'd leave a sealed note in my room detailing where I was going and why, to be opened if I didn't return within an hour. I'd also keep my location services active on my phone, which Jen was monitoring after the events of the past week. At precisely 2 p.m., I knocked on the door of room 847, my heart pounding with equal parts anxiety and determination. There was a long pause before the door opened, revealing a face I recognized but couldn't immediately place. A woman in her early 40s, her dark hair now cropped short, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Sarah," she said simply, "thank you for coming. Please come in." As she stepped back, recognition clicked. "You're David's assistant, Rebecca." She nodded, closing the door behind me. "Former assistant. I was fired 3 days ago. Please sit down. We don't have much time." The room was standard hotel fare, indistinguishable from my own except for the papers spread across the desk and bed. Printouts, photographs, what appeared to be financial records. "Why am I here?" I asked, remaining standing despite her invitation. "Because there are things about David, about his situation, that the police don't know yet. Things you should understand before making any decisions about your future." Her tone was earnest, but caution kept me wary. "How do I know you're not part of whatever David was involved in?" A flash of pain crossed her features. "I worked for David for 6 years. I thought I knew him. Then 3 months ago, I began noticing discrepancies, strange meetings not in his official calendar, calls he'd take in the stairwell rather than his office, financial reports that didn't add up." She gestured to the papers. "I started keeping records. Nothing concrete at first, just inconsistencies. Then Veronica, or Katerina, I guess, joined the company and everything accelerated. David changed, became secretive, started staying late with her for projects that never appeared in any company files. Why didn't you report this to the police, or at least company management?" Rebecca looked down. "I did, eventually. To Martin Reeves, the company security director. He thanked me for my diligence and said he'd handle it internally." Her mouth twisted bitterly. 3 days ago, I was called to HR and terminated for performance issues that had never been mentioned in 7 years with the company. Martin didn't even look me in the eye. The implication was clear. "You think the company is involved in whatever David was doing?" "I think it goes higher than David, deeper than a single rogue employee." She handed me a folder. "These are copies of communications I managed to document. Emails, meeting notes, financial transfers between shell companies I traced. I've sent everything to the FBI, but..." She hesitated. "I'm worried it will get buried. Too many powerful people implicated." I opened the folder, scanning documents filled with corporate jargon and financial notation beyond my immediate comprehension. Why show me this? What am I supposed to do with it? Because buried in there is evidence that David may not have been acting entirely of his own volition. Rebecca pointed to a specific email chain. These messages between Martin and someone identified only as V discuss leveraging David's vulnerability once your medical situation became known. They knew he was in over his head with certain investments, knew he'd need substantial funds, quickly. I read the exchange she indicated, a chill spreading through me at the calculated way these people had discussed exploiting my surgery and David's financial desperation. They manipulated him, Rebecca continued. I'm not excusing what he did. It was unconscionable, cruel. But I think you should know he was being pressured, possibly threatened. They needed his skills for something bigger, and they used your situation as the perfect opportunity to compromise him completely. Why would you risk telling me this? If what you're saying is true, these are dangerous people. She smiled grimly. My apartment was broken into last night. My computer, backup drives, everything taken. I'm leaving the country tonight. My cousin, in Toronto, is expecting me. But I couldn't go without giving you this information. You deserve to know the full picture. I studied her, searching for signs of deception but finding only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine concern. These people, whoever they are, do they know about the money being returned? About the arrests? They know, and they'll be looking for alternative solutions. Damage control. David's arrest complicates things but doesn't end them. Meaning what exactly? Rebecca gathered her papers methodically. Meaning watch your back, Sarah. David might be in custody, but the organization he was working with, wittingly or unwittingly, is still operational. And they had plans for that money that are now disrupted. As I left Rebecca's room 30 minutes later, her documents copied and secured in my bag, my mind raced with implications. If what she suggested was true, David's betrayal existed in a more complex context than I'd initially understood. Not exonerated, but influenced by external pressure and manipulation. More disturbingly, the danger hadn't ended with David's arrest. It had merely shifted form. I was still processing these revelations when I rounded the corner toward my room and stopped short. The door was ajar, a hotel staff member visible inside. "Excuse me," I called sharply. "What are you doing in my room?" The man turned, revealing the uniform of hotel maintenance. "Just checking the air conditioning, ma'am. Front desk reported a complaint." I made no such complaint. A flicker of something crossed his face, annoyance, concern, before his expression smoothed into professional neutrality. "Must be a mix-up with room numbers. My apologies." He brushed past me, tool bag in hand, and I watched him walk calmly toward the elevator before entering my room cautiously. Nothing seemed disturbed at first glance, but the sense of violation was immediate and unsettling. Someone had been in my space, whether legitimate hotel staff or something more sinister. I called the front desk. "Did maintenance request access to my room today for an air conditioning issue?" "One moment, ma'am." I heard keyboard clicking. "No, we have no work orders for your room today." My heart rate accelerated. "A maintenance worker was just in my room. He said you'd reported an issue." A pause. "I'll send security up immediately, Miss Mitchell." While waiting for security, I did a quick inventory. My luggage appeared untouched, bathroom undisturbed. Then I noticed the sealed envelope containing my note about meeting Rebecca. It had been moved slightly from where I'd left it on the desk. Almost imperceptible, but definitely not in the exact position I'd placed it. Hotel security arrived, took my statement, and conducted a superficial search of the room, finding nothing obviously amiss. They offered to move me to a different room, which I accepted immediately. As the security manager arranged the transfer, I texted Detective Larson about the incident, then called Jen to update her. "I'm coming to get you," she insisted. "Hotel security isn't enough if these people are as connected as everyone keeps suggesting." "Detective Larson is sending an officer," I assured her, though her concern mirrored my own growing unease. "I'll be fine for now." But as I gathered my belongings, Rebecca's warning echoed in my mind. "Watch your back, Sarah." The implications were becoming increasingly clear. My recovery, physical, emotional, and financial, would happen against the backdrop of an ongoing criminal investigation where I was now both victim and potential witness. 2 hours later, newly situated in a different room with a police officer stationed in the hallway, I received a call from Mark Tanner. "Sarah, I need to see you as soon as possible," he said without preamble. "There's been another development with your accounts." My stomach dropped. "What kind of development? I thought everything was secured." "It is, but—" He hesitated. "This isn't a conversation for the phone. Can you come to the bank tomorrow morning first thing?" "Mark, after everything that's happened, you can't drop something like that and expect me to wait until tomorrow for details." He sighed. "You're right. I apologize." His voice lowered. "We've received inquiries about your accounts, specifically the reversed transactions, from a federal agency I'm not familiar with. They're presenting documentation requesting access to your financial records that appears legitimate, but something feels off." "What agency?" They identified themselves as part of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which exists, but the paperwork and approach don't match standard protocols. I've initiated verification procedures, but I wanted you to be aware. Another attempt to access my funds, this time through official-looking channels. The persistence was both frightening and revealing. Whatever operation David had been involved with, my recovered money remained a priority target. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Nothing yet. I've flagged this with our security team and legal department, but given recent events, I thought, you should know immediately. And Sarah," he paused, "you might consider moving those funds to a different institution altogether. Perhaps one with no connection to your previous financial history with David." It was an unusual suggestion from a banker, essentially advising me to take my substantial assets elsewhere, which only underscored the seriousness of his concern. "I'll think about it," I promised. "And Mark, thank you again." After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the weight of successive revelations pressing down on me. Every layer peeled back revealed a situation more complex and threatening than I'd initially understood. What had begun as a devastating personal betrayal was expanding into something that involved criminal organizations, corporate complicity, and now potentially compromised government agencies. My phone chimed with a text from Detective Larson. "Officer Williams will remain posted outside your room tonight. We're investigating the maintenance worker incident. We'll brief you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. At least I wasn't facing this alone. Between Mark, Detective Larson, Jen, and now a uniformed officer in the hallway, I had allies. But as I prepared for bed in this strange hotel room, wincing at the surgical pain that reasserted itself with every movement, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something far beyond a betrayed wife seeking justice for financial theft. Was becoming a threat to powerful people who weren't accustomed to being thwarted, people who had already demonstrated their willingness to exploit vulnerability and ignore basic human decency in pursuit of their objectives. And somewhere in the county jail, the man I had loved for 15 years, the architect of this nightmare, whether by choice or coercion, held pieces of the puzzle I still couldn't fully see. Morning arrived after a fitful night of half-sleep and heightened vigilance. Every hotel noise, ice machines, distant elevators, doors closing down the hallway, triggered a surge of adrenaline. By the time Detective Larson arrived at 8 a.m., I was already on my third cup of coffee, exhaustion and anxiety creating a jittery combination. "We found him," she announced without preamble, setting a folder on the small table by the window. "The maintenance worker. His name is Eric Donovan, and he's not hotel staff." She showed me a mugshot of the man who'd been in my room, his expression harder in the photo than the apologetic maintenance worker I'd encountered, but unmistakably the same person. He has a record, mostly small-time stuff, breaking and entering, identity theft, but he's been linked to larger operations as a low-level operative, a hired hand. "Hired by whom?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. We're working on that, but his known associates include several individuals connected to Alex Volov's network. Was he looking for something specific in my room? Detective. Larson's expression turned grim. We believe so. When we arrested him last night, he had this. She produced an evidence bag containing a small electronic device I didn't recognize. It's a specialized bug. High-end, military grade. Not something an ordinary thief would possess. The implication sent a chill through me. They were going to monitor me. Why? Information gathering, most likely. Your conversations, movements, contacts. These organizations operate on intelligence, knowing what their opposition knows, anticipating next moves. Opposition. The word struck me forcefully. That's what I'd become without ever intending it. Opposition to whatever criminal enterprise had ensnared my husband. What happens now? I asked. Donovan's not talking yet, but we're hoping he'll reconsider once he understands the severity of the charges. In the meantime, I strongly recommend relocating again, somewhere more secure than a hotel, not associated with your name. I have a cabin, I found myself saying, in the Berkshires, wedding gift from my godmother. It's under a family trust, not directly linked to me or David on paper. Few people know about it. Detective Larson nodded approvingly. Perfect. When can you leave? Today. I need to meet with my bank manager first, but after that, I'll arrange for an escort. Not marked police, that would attract attention, but reliable protection. She glanced at the windows, a habit I'd noticed before. Always assessing, always vigilant. The fewer people who know your destination, the better. Not your sister, not your friends. Just me and the officers assigned to your detail. The severity of these precautions underscored the danger I still faced. What about David? Should I be concerned about him arranging something from jail? His communications are monitored, and he's been denied bail. That said, she hesitated, he's been asking to see you repeatedly. Claims he has critical information that can only be shared with you directly. And you think I should talk to him? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. I think information is valuable, and David Mitchell is currently our best source on Volov's organization. If he's willing to share that with you rather than federal investigators, there may be a strategic advantage in hearing what he has to say. It was a coldly practical assessment, devoid of the emotional complexities that colored my own perspective on seeing David again. But she wasn't wrong. David clearly possessed knowledge that might prove crucial to understanding the full scope of the situation I was embroiled in. I'll think about it, I said finally. After I'm settled somewhere secure. Detective Larson seemed satisfied with this compromise. She departed to arrange my protection detail while I prepared for my meeting with Mark at the bank. First Regional's main branch exuded stability and tradition. Marble columns, polished brass fixtures, hushed conversations in private offices. Mark met me in the lobby, his normally cheerful demeanor subdued as he escorted me past the teller windows to his office in the back. I've completed the verification process on those federal inquiries, he said once the door closed behind us. They're sophisticated forgeries. Excellent ones, but definitely not legitimate government documentation. So more of Volov's people, trying another angle. Mark nodded grimly. Likely so, which brings me to my recommendation. He slid a document across his desk. I've prepared the paperwork to transfer your funds to an entirely new account at Somerset. Trust. They're smaller, more exclusive, with enhanced security protocols. No connection whatsoever to your previous banking history. Somerset Trust was known for catering to high-net-worth clients with complex security needs. Foreign diplomats, celebrities requiring privacy, individuals with legitimate reasons to protect their assets from public scrutiny. This seems extreme, I observed, though I was already reaching for the papers. These are extreme circumstances. Mark's expression was deadly serious. Sarah, I've been in banking for 28 years. I've seen financial fraud, divorce asset hiding, even organized crime money movement. What's happening with your accounts reflects a level of persistence and sophistication that concerns me deeply. As I signed the transfer documentation, Mark continued explaining the security measures being implemented: dual authentication for any transaction requests, no telephone banking access, strict in-person verification protocols. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into his desk drawer. "This USB drive contains all your banking records from the past 5 years. Every transaction, every transfer, account openings and closings, everything." I accepted the small device, confused. Why would I need this? Because history is important. Patterns matter. If you're trying to understand how David became involved with these people when the financial entanglement began, this might provide insight that verbal explanations won't. It was a thoughtful gesture from someone who'd gone far, beyond professional obligation in protecting my interests. "Thank you, Mark, for everything." He dismissed my gratitude with a wave. "I'm just doing my job, though I admit it's become rather more exciting than typical bank management lately." I left First Regional with my finances more secure than ever, the USB drive tucked safely in my handbag alongside Rebecca's documents, 2 pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to comprehend. My police escort, a plainclothes officer named Rivera, who looked more like an off-duty gym trainer than law enforcement, was waiting in an unmarked sedan outside the bank. We made one stop at a department store for me to purchase essentials for my stay at the cabin, then headed northwest out of the city. As urban landscapes gave way to increasingly rural scenery, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Accessing. "Accounts through Somerset won't work either. We need to talk. Mutual benefit possible. Reply to arrange meeting. KP Katerina Petrova, David's mistress and apparent handler." Officer Rivera noticed my expression. "Problem?" I hesitated, then handed him my phone. "Just received this." He studied the message, then immediately pulled over and made a call. After a brief technical conversation I couldn't fully follow, he returned my phone. "Detective Larson is tracing the number. Don't reply. We're changing routes just in case." How would she know about Somerset? The accounts were just created an hour ago. Rivera's expression was grim. "That's exactly what we're concerned about. The information flow shouldn't be that immediate." For the remainder of the drive, we took secondary roads, doubling back occasionally, once even parking behind an abandoned gas station for 20 minutes while Rivera scanned our surroundings with binoculars. It was like something from a spy movie, except the anxiety knotting my stomach was entirely real. We reached the cabin near dusk, a small A-frame structure nestled among pines overlooking a lake that reflected the fading light. In happier times, David and I had spent long weekends here, hiking in summer, snowshoeing in winter, disconnecting from work and city stress. Now it would serve as my refuge from dangers he had helped create. Officer Rivera conducted a thorough sweep of the property before declaring it secure. A second officer arrived shortly after, introductions made, shifts organized. They would alternate monitoring the perimeter, one always awake while the other rested in the small guest room. "Detective Larson will check in tomorrow," Rivera informed me. "Cell service is spotty here, but the satellite phone in our vehicle always works if you need immediate assistance." Alone in the cabin's main bedroom, I finally allowed myself a moment of genuine emotion. Not just fear or anxiety, but the deep, wrenching grief I'd been suppressing since waking from surgery to find my husband gone and my life unraveling. I sobbed into the pillow, body shaking with the force of feelings too complex to name. When the storm finally passed, I rose and moved to the small desk overlooking the lake. From my bag, I withdrew Rebecca's documents, the USB drive from Mark, and a notebook I'd purchased during our shopping stop. If I was ever going to understand what had happened to my marriage, my finances, my sense of basic reality, I needed to Assemble the pieces systematically. Track the progression from David the loving husband to David the criminal conspirator. Identify when and how he'd been compromised, how deeply he was involved, and whether any part of our shared life had been genuine. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and began scrolling through years of financial records. Somewhere in these transactions was the thread that, when pulled, would unravel the entire deception. I just had to find it. The financial forensics consumed me through the night and into the next morning. What began as a methodical review of bank statements evolved into a complex web of sticky notes, timeline sketches, and highlighted transactions spread across the cabin's dining table. Officer Rivera occasionally glanced at my work with professional curiosity, but asked no questions. A pattern emerged, gradually becoming clearer as I cross-referenced the financial records with Rebecca's documents. 18 months ago, David had opened a separate checking account. Nothing suspicious there, as we'd always maintained individual accounts alongside our joint ones. But the activity in this particular account told a story. Regular deposits, always under $10,000, the threshold for mandatory reporting to financial authorities, followed by transfers to offshore entities with generic corporate names. The amounts grew over time, starting at $3,000 monthly, eventually reaching $2,800. Consulting fees, according to the transaction notes. Around 8 months ago, the pattern shifted. The deposits continued, but new withdrawals appeared, large ones to investment platforms I'd never heard of, some labeled as Opportunity Fund or Venture Capital Placement. This aligned with Rebecca's documents, which included fragments of emails discussing high-yield opportunities and guaranteed returns. Then, 3 months ago, around the time Veronica Katerina had appeared, everything escalated. The separate account saw a sudden influx of $50,000 from an entity called Meridian Consulting Group, followed by withdrawals totaling nearly $200,000 to various investment vehicles. Within weeks, those investments showed massive losses. I was staring at the documented unraveling of my husband's financial life, a progression from apparent side consulting to increasingly desperate investment, attempts culminating in catastrophic losses, all hidden from me, all coinciding with my tumor diagnosis and treatment planning. Detective Larson arrived mid-morning, accepting coffee from Officer Rivera while reviewing my findings. This tracks with what we're piecing together from the Financial Crimes Unit, she confirmed. Your husband appears to have been pulled in gradually. First, legitimate consulting work for shell companies connected to Volov, then increasingly questionable assignments. The investment losses were likely by design. What do we? You mean? It's a common tactic in these organizations. They offer apparent investment opportunities, guarantee significant returns, encourage larger and larger buy-in. But the investments are rigged to fail. The target loses everything, finds themselves deeply indebted to dangerous people, and becomes vulnerable to coercion. I processed this information, connecting more dots. So they deliberately got him in over his head financially, then used that leverage to force his cooperation on more serious criminal activities. Exactly. And once he was compromised, your medical situation created the perfect opportunity for them to push him toward a more drastic solution. The implication hung in the air between us. David's theft wasn't a simple betrayal or midlife crisis gone wrong. It was the culmination of a sophisticated, long-term manipulation by professional criminals. It doesn't excuse what he did, I said, finally, voicing the conflict that had been building inside me since meeting Rebecca. He still made choices. Terrible ones, at every step. Absolutely, Detective Larson agreed. Understanding context doesn't erase responsibility. He had options besides stealing from his wife during her surgery. Her bluntness was oddly comforting. The emerging complexities of David's situation could easily have become an excuse to minimize what he'd done to me. Detective Larson wasn't allowing that equivocation. Has he said anything useful since his arrest? I asked. Limited cooperation. He's provided some names, some operational details, but he's holding back the most valuable information. She studied me carefully. He insists he'll only share everything with you. Says it involves your safety directly. And you still think I should consider meeting him? Professionally speaking, yes. Information is our best protection at this point. But personally, she shook her head slightly, I wouldn't blame you for telling him to go to hell. The contradiction between these perspectives mirrored my own internal conflict. Part of me never wanted to see David again. The part still raw, from betrayal, still processing the realization that the man I'd built a life with had been willing to abandon me at my most vulnerable. But another part needed answers that only he could provide. About our past, about the current danger, about whether anything in our shared life had been genuine. I'll meet with him, I decided, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Arrange it somewhere secure, not the jail. I don't want to go there. Detective Larson nodded. I'll coordinate with the district attorney's office. We can set up a monitored meeting at a neutral location, probably tomorrow. In the meantime, I need to understand more about this organization. How they operate. What they might do next. I gestured to the financial documentation scattered across the table. This gives me the what and when, but not the why or how. I can help with that. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick file folder. This is a sanitized version of our intelligence briefing on Volov's network. No classified sources, but enough to give you a clearer picture of what we're dealing with. I spent the afternoon immersed in the file while Detective Larson coordinated my meeting with David. The picture that emerged was sobering. Volov's organization wasn't just any criminal enterprise. It was a sophisticated operation with tentacles in banking, technology, real estate, and government. They specialized in identity creation, financial fraud, and digital money laundering, all areas where David's IT skills would have been valuable. Most concerning was their pattern of leveraging personal vulnerabilities, addictions, medical issues, family problems, to recruit otherwise law-abiding professionals. David's case wasn't unique. The file documented a software engineer compromised through gambling debts, an accountant through her son's drug problem, a bank compliance officer through a sick spouse needing experimental treatment not covered by insurance. The parallels were unmistakable. Identify weakness, create financial pressure, offer solutions that lead to compromise, then escalate demands. It was systematic, calculated, and devastatingly effective. By evening, Detective Larson had confirmed arrangements for my meeting with David, 11 a.m. tomorrow at a secure federal building downtown. As she prepared to leave, she handed me a sealed envelope. One more thing. The tech team finished analyzing Donovan's phone, the man who planted the bug in your hotel room. These were the most recent text messages before his arrest. I opened the envelope and read the transcript. Target relocated to hotel. Room 318. Surveillance initiated. Confirm if financial records present. Priority retrieval. Secondary target. Sister, under passive watch. No approach yet. Asset Inside PD reports transfer in process. Moving funds to Somerset. Address this immediately. The casual reference to Jen as a secondary target and the mention of an asset inside PD sent ice through my veins. You have a leak, I said, looking up at Detective Larson. Someone in the police department is feeding them information. So it appears. Her expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the anger beneath it. We're conducting an internal investigation quietly. Very limited circle of knowledge. Who knows about this cabin, about me being here? Just me, the 2 officers assigned to your detail, and my direct supervisor, Captain Brennan. No one else. I wanted to believe that meant I was safe, but the evidence of the organization's reach and resources made absolute security feel increasingly illusory. Be careful tomorrow, Detective Larson said as she left. Remember that David is a skilled manipulator, whether on his own behalf or under pressure from others. Listen to what he has to say, but filter everything through what you now know. That night, I barely slept, my mind cycling through the evidence I'd assembled and the questions still unanswered. By morning, I felt oddly calm. The artificial steadiness, that comes from exhaustion pushed beyond normal limits. Officer Rivera drove me to the meeting, following an elaborate route that involved 2 vehicle changes and entering the federal building through a service entrance. Security was tight, metal detectors, ID verification, armed guards at every turn. Finally, I was led to a small conference room furnished with nothing but a table and 2 chairs. A one-way mirror dominated one wall, and cameras were visible in opposite corners. We'll be watching and recording, the federal agent in charge informed me. If you feel threatened or want to end the meeting, just say, "We're done here," and we'll remove him immediately. Don't reveal any personal details about your current location or security arrangements. Understood? I nodded, settling into one of the chairs as the door opened on the opposite side of the room. David entered, escorted by a guard. He looked even worse than the last time I'd seen him, thinner, paler, with a defeated slump to his shoulders that I'd never observed before. Prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame, hands cuffed in front of him, he seemed diminished in every way. His eyes found mine immediately, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face: relief, shame, fear, and something that looked almost like hope. "Sarah," he said softly as the guard secured his handcuffs to a ring on the table. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you." I studied David across the table, searching for remnants of the man I'd known. The confident IT consultant with the easy laugh and meticulous attention to detail had vanished, replaced by this hollow-eyed stranger. "You look terrible," I said, finally, unsure how to begin this impossible conversation. A faint smile flickered across his face. Prison food, not exactly up to my standards. The attempted humor felt like a ghost of our former dynamic, and I refused to be drawn into it. "Why am I here, David? What's so important that you'll only tell me and not the investigators?" He leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed, lowering his voice despite the obvious surveillance. "I met with Katerina yesterday. That caught me off guard." "Here, she visited you? She never mentioned meeting me? How would she? I haven't spoken with her." I kept my expression neutral, not revealing the text message I'd received. "She's offering you a deal, isn't she?" His gaze was intense, searching. "Protection, maybe financial compensation, in exchange for convincing me to cooperate with them, instead of the authorities." The accuracy of his prediction unsettled me. Why would she do that? Because I created fail-safes, Sarah. Insurance against exactly this situation. "What kind of fail-safes?" He glanced at the one-way mirror, then back to me. "Evidence. Comprehensive documentation of everything. Financial transactions, communications, identities, organizational structure. Enough to dismantle Volov's entire network if it falls into the right hands. And they're afraid you've given this evidence to me?" Understanding dawned. "Or that I will. They know we'll eventually talk. They're hoping to get to you first, turn you against me, use you to neutralize the threat." I leaned back in my chair, processing this. "If you have such valuable information, why not use it to make a deal with prosecutors? Reduced sentence, witness protection?" "Because it's not that simple." Frustration edged his voice. "There are complications. People on the inside. Law enforcement, judiciary, government agencies. I don't know who to trust." Rebecca's documents had suggested something similar, but hearing it from David made the threat feel more immediate. "And you expect me to trust you?" The question emerged sharper than I'd intended. "After everything you've done?" Pain flashed across his face. "No, I don't expect that. I don't deserve it." He took a deep breath. "But I need you to understand the danger you're in. These people won't stop. The money, The targeting of your hotel room? Those are just opening moves. Tell me about Katerina. I needed to understand this woman who had become intertwined with our destruction. She's more than Volov's associate. She's his niece. Family. Loyalty above all else, that's their code. She was placed at my company specifically to recruit me after they identified my skill set as valuable. And the affair? His eyes dropped to his hands. It wasn't supposed to happen. Part of her job was getting close to me, understanding my vulnerabilities. I was supposed to be analyzing security protocols for what I thought was a legitimate financial services client. By the time I realized who they really were, I was already compromised. When exactly did you realize you were working for criminals? I pressed. About 8 months ago. A project to create alternative verification pathways for certain high-net-worth clients. I discovered they were using my systems to bypass anti-money laundering controls. When I tried to back away, they showed me evidence of my unwitting participation in earlier illegal activities. Then they introduced me to the investment opportunity that would supposedly solve everything. The timeline matched what I'd pieced together from the financial records. The investments that wiped you out, he nodded. Controlled from the beginning to fail. By the time I realized it was a trap, I was in so deep there seemed no way out. Then your diagnosis came, and they saw an opportunity. I finished for him, remembering Rebecca's documents referencing my convenient surgery. They presented it as a solution. Take the money while you were incapacitated, disappear with Katerina, who would help establish new identities for us in exchange for my continued work for the organization. They promised that once things cooled down, we could arrange for you to join us. The casual cruelty of it, planning my financial destruction while I faced a life-threatening medical crisis, still took my breath away. You could have gone to the police at any point. They made it very clear what would happen if I did. His voice dropped even lower. They knew everything about you, Sarah. Your routines, your patients, which coffee shop you stopped at before, work. It wasn't just vague threats. I thought of the text messages Detective Larson had shown me, the reference to me as a target and Jen as a secondary target. So instead, you decided to steal our life savings and run away with your handler? He flinched. It's not that simple. It seems pretty straightforward from where I'm sitting, I countered, anger rising despite my determination to stay detached. The plan was to protect you by making it look like I'd betrayed you completely, he insisted. If they believed you were as much a victim as anyone else, they'd have no reason to target you after I was gone. The affair with Katerina, the timing during surgery, all of it was designed to create a convincing narrative of a husband having a midlife crisis, making a clean break. How considerate, I said coldly. I know how it sounds. I know what I did was unforgivable. He met my eyes directly for the first time. But I need you to understand one thing, Sarah. I was trying to protect you the only way I could see at the time. By leaving me financially devastated during a medical crisis? I had a separate account set up for you, he said quietly. In your maiden name, offshore, untraceable, nearly $400,000. Enough to support you through recovery and beyond. A trusted contact was supposed to provide you with the access information a month after your surgery. Once I was established in the new location, this was new information, something that hadn't appeared in any of the financial documentation I'd reviewed. There's no evidence of any such account, because it wasn't connected to our known finances. I'd been skimming from the payments Volov's organization was making to me, setting it aside specifically for this purpose. I wanted to believe him. Some part of me desperately needed to believe that he hadn't completely abandoned me. But skepticism prevailed. Convenient that there's no way to verify this claim. There is, he said. Marcus has the account information. Marcus? Your coworker? He's more than that. He's been working with federal investigators for months, trying to build a case against Volov from the inside. He's the one who connected me with people I could trust when I decided to gather evidence against the organization. Pieces clicked. Together in my mind, why David might have evidence that could bring down the organization, why he was reluctant to share it with just any law enforcement. Is Marcus your trusted contact? The one who was supposed to give me access to this mysterious account? David nodded. He was handling everything after I left. But the plan fell apart when the bank reversed the transfers, and the police became involved immediately. And now? Now the organization knows I've gathered evidence against them. They're scrambling to contain the situation. That's why they're reaching out to you. They think you either have access to the evidence already or can get it from me. Do I asked directly, have access to this evidence? His expression changed, becoming more guarded. Not yet, but you could. That's part of why I needed to see you. What exactly do you want from me, David? He leaned forward again, his voice barely above a whisper. I need you to make them believe you're considering their offer. Keep communication open. It buys us time while Marcus finishes securing the evidence and connects with the right people. In federal law enforcement, people we know aren't compromised. Us? There is no us anymore, David. The words came out steady, definitive. Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. I understand. But regardless of what happens between us, your safety depends on how this plays out. If Volov's organization feels cornered, they become unpredictable. Dangerous. The cynical part of me wondered if this was just another manipulation. David, trying to maneuver me into helping him secure a better deal or escape consequences. How do I know any of this is true? The offshore account, Marcus working with federal investigators, the evidence you've gathered. This could all be another elaborate deception. It's not, he said simply. Call Marcus. He'll confirm everything. And if I decide not to get involved? If I walk away right now and let you deal with the consequences of your choices? His expression softened into resignation. Then I'll respect that decision. I'll do everything I can to keep you out of it, to direct any potential danger away from you. But Sarah, these people won't simply forget about you. As long as they think you might have access to what I know, you'll be a target. The harsh reality of that statement hung in the air between us. One last question, I said, gathering my resolve. Was any of it real? Our marriage? Or was I just a convenient cover all along? For the first time, tears welled in his eyes. It was real. All of it. The only genuine thing in my life for the past 15 years. What I've done to you is unforgivable, and I will regret it every day for the rest of my life. But don't ever doubt that I loved you, Sarah. I still do. The sincerity in his voice pierced something I'd been holding rigid inside me. I stood abruptly, needing to end this conversation before my emotions betrayed me. I need to think about all this. I can't promise anything. He nodded, acceptance in his posture. Just be careful. Trust few people. And if Katerina contacts you again? He hesitated. Remember that everything she does serves Volov's interests, not yours. As I turned to leave, he called out one more thing. Check the wedding rings, Sarah. Our anniversary set. I paused, hand on the door. What about them? Just find them. They're not what they appear to be. With that cryptic statement hanging in the air, I left the room, my mind spinning with new information and fresh uncertainties. Detective Larson was waiting in the observation room when I emerged, her expression unreadable as she studied me. That was informative, she said carefully. What do you make of his claims? I don't know. The honest answer slipped out before. I could construct something more composed. Some of it aligns with what we already know. Some seems convenient, impossible to verify. The mention of your anniversary rings was interesting, she observed. Any idea what he meant by that? I thought back to the custom bands David had insisted on designing for our 10th anniversary 2 years ago. Platinum with an unusual internal channel structure. I'd assumed it was merely aesthetic, one of David's endless quests for unique design. They were special order, custom design. I haven't seen mine since before the surgery. I assumed David took it when he cleared out the safe. Deposit box. Worth looking into, she made a note. And this Marcus person, you know him? David's colleague. I've met him at company functions. Quiet, efficient, keeps to himself. I had no idea he might be working with federal investigators. We'll verify that claim, she assured me. If he's cooperating with any agency, there will be records. We walked toward the exit, flanked by security personnel. What about the rest? I asked. The idea that there are people inside law enforcement working with Volov's organization? Her expression tightened. Unfortunately, that part is credible. We've had concerns about potential inside information leaks. It's why we've kept your protection details so limited. Outside, the bright daylight felt jarring after the fluorescent confines of the federal building. Officer Rivera was waiting with the car, vigilantly scanning the surroundings before opening the door for me. What now? I asked as we pulled away from the curb. Now we corroborate what we can of David's claims. I'll reach out to my FBI contacts about Marcus, see if he's a registered informant. Meanwhile, she checked her watch. I've arranged for a cybersecurity team to meet us at a secure location to examine your devices. If David's right about the organization's reach, we need to ensure you're not being monitored electronically. And the rings? We'll add them to the list of items to locate. If they were taken from the safe deposit box, they may be in evidence storage from Volov's arrest. The secure location turned out to be a nondescript office building in an industrial park at the edge of the city. Inside, a team of technicians in civilian clothes received us in a windowless conference room lined with computers and specialized equipment. Everything comes off, a stern woman with close-cropped gray hair instructed me. Phone, laptop, smartwatch, earbuds, anything electronic. We'll scan them all. For the next 3 hours, I watched as they methodically disassembled, scanned, and analyzed every device I owned. The results were sobering. Your phone has 2 unauthorized applications running in the background, the technician explained, pointing to code on her screen. One is a location tracker, the other an audio capture program that activates whenever the phone detects conversation. Since when? Installation timestamp shows 4 days ago, around 2 p.m. My meeting with Rebecca at the hotel. She must have installed the malware while I was in her room. Your laptop also shows signs of compromise, the technician continued. More sophisticated, a remote access Trojan that would allow someone to view your screen, access your files, even activate the webcam without your knowledge. The violations felt physical, as though someone had been standing in the corner of every room, watching me, listening. The technician handed me a new phone. Clean device. Your contacts and essential apps have been transferred, but nothing else. From the old phone. Same for the laptop. She nodded toward a sealed box. New machine with your critical data migrated. I wouldn't recommend connecting to any accounts or entering passwords until you're in a secure location. By the time we finished, evening was approaching. Detective Larson received a call as we were preparing to leave, stepping away to take it in private. When she returned, her expression had shifted subtly. That was my contact at the FBI, she said once we were back in the car. Marcus Reynolds is indeed a confidential informant. Has been for approximately 7 months, working on building a case against Volov's network. So that part of David's story checked out. Did he mention anything about an offshore account in my maiden name? Not specifically, but he confirmed that Marcus has been handling certain financial arrangements at David's direction. They're setting up a meeting for us tomorrow. Progress, but not yet confirmation. And the rings? Still working on that. Back at the cabin, Officer Rivera installed additional security measures, motion detectors at the perimeter, reinforced locks on the doors and windows. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to sort through everything I'd learned. David's claims, the compromised devices, the verification of Marcus as an informant. pieces of a puzzle still taking shape. My new phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. We need to meet. Tomorrow, noon, Lakeside Coffee. Come alone. Last chance for a mutually beneficial arrangement. KPII showed the message to Detective Larson, who frowned. How did she get this number? It was just activated today. The leak in the department? Possibly. Or someone at the federal building. She considered for a moment. This could be an opportunity, if you're willing. To do what? Meet with her, wearing a wire. Get her to specify exactly what she's offering, what she wants in exchange. We could build a stronger case against her and potentially gather information about their operations. Wouldn't that be dangerous? We'd have the location secured, officers at every exit, surveillance on all approaching vehicles. You'd never be truly alone. I thought about David's suggestion to keep communication open with Katerina, to make her believe I was considering their offer. Was he manipulating me again, or had he been genuine in his concern? I'll do it, I decided. But I want full protection, and I want to know exactly what I'm supposed to get her to say. Detective Larson nodded. We'll brief you thoroughly in the morning. For now, get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging. Rest proved elusive. I lay awake in the cabin's bedroom, moonlight filtering through pine branches outside the window, mind racing through scenarios. What if Katerina revealed something critical about David's involvement? What if she offered proof that he'd been a willing participant rather than a pressured accomplice? Was I prepared to hear that? More troubling still, what if David had been telling the truth about everything? About trying to protect me, about the offshore account, about the danger I was still in? What would that mean for how I understood the past week of my life? The betrayal, the abandonment, the theft? Morning came with no clearer answers but a steely resolve. If meeting with Katerina could help untangle this web of deception and danger, then that's what I would do. The briefing was thorough. Detective Larson and 2 FBI agents walked me through exactly what information they needed from Katerina. Specific. Admissions about Volov's organization, details about their operations, anything that would connect her directly to criminal activities. They fitted me with a wire, tested it repeatedly, and reviewed emergency protocols. If anything feels wrong, use the code word headache, and we'll extract you immediately, Detective Larson reminded me. Don't try to be a hero. I'm not feeling particularly heroic, I admitted as we drove toward the Lakeside Cafe. Just desperate. For answers. The cafe was picturesque, situated on the shore of a small lake with a deck extending over the water. In tourist season, it would be bustling, but the current off-season lull left only a handful of tables occupied. I arrived at precisely noon, escorted by Detective Larson posing as a friend. We chatted casually as she scanned our surroundings. 4 other officers were already positioned, one behind the counter posing as a barista, one reading a newspaper by the window, 2 more at separate tables with laptops. Remember, Detective, Larson murmured as we settled at a table with clear sight lines to both entrances. If anything feels wrong, use the code word. Don't try to be a hero. She squeezed my hand briefly before moving to her own table, becoming just another customer, enjoying the lakeside view while working on her tablet. At exactly 12:05, the door opened, and Katerina walked in. I'd only seen her once before, at a company function months ago, and the transformation was striking. Gone was the casual, artistic Veronica persona. This woman moved with sleek precision, her blonde hair now cut in a severe bob, wearing a tailored business suit that radiated authority. She spotted me immediately, her eyes flicking around the cafe in a quick assessment before she approached. Sarah, her accent was more pronounced than I remembered. Thank you for coming. You didn't leave me much choice, I replied as she slid into the seat across from me. Your texts made it clear the situation is escalating. A server approached, not. The undercover officer, but an actual cafe employee. Katerina ordered an espresso without looking at the menu. I asked for tea. "Let's be direct," she said once we were alone again. "You think you understand what happened with David and your money. You don't. Then explain it to me." She leaned forward slightly. "David was compromised, yes. In debt to dangerous people, yes. But what no one has told you, what the police haven't figured out yet, is that David was never the primary target." Her gaze locked with mine. "You were." The statement landed like a physical blow. "Me? Why would anyone target me?" "Your patients, specifically. The access you have to certain individuals through your physical therapy practice." I stared at her, struggling to make sense of this claim. My private practice specialized in spinal rehabilitation. My clients were diverse, from car accident victims to athletes with stress injuries to elderly patients maintaining mobility. Nothing that would interest criminal organizations. I don't understand. 3 of your regular patients work for Northfield Technologies. One is the company's chief security officer, another is their head of network infrastructure. The third is a senior engineer on their quantum computing team. The names flashed through my mind. Carl Henderson with his bi-weekly appointments for chronic back pain, Margaret Wu recovering from disc surgery, Thomas Brantley with his sports-related shoulder injury, all with Northfield Technologies ID badges, all higher-level employees based on our casual conversations during therapy sessions. So Northfield Technologies has developed an encryption system that certain interests find problematic for their operations. Access to their internal systems would be extremely valuable. Understanding began to dawn. You thought I could somehow... What? Plant something on their devices. Extract information while doing physical therapy? Katerina's espresso arrived. She took a deliberate sip before answering. The original plan was sophisticated. David would create digital identities and access profiles. You would innocently deploy specialized hardware during therapy sessions, devices disguised as standard medical equipment, developed to capture network credentials when within proximity of target devices. That's insane. David knows I would never agree to something like that. Of course. That's why you were never meant to know. David was supposed to handle the technical aspects, and Alexei's people would modify your equipment without your knowledge. Your role was to be entirely unwitting. My mind raced through implications. And when David refused to involve me, he became a problem. She confirmed with a slight nod. He was willing to provide technical services, launder money, even develop false identities. But he drew a line at bringing you into the operation, even unknowingly. So they deliberately pushed him into financial desperation. I concluded, the pieces clicking together. The failed investments, the mounting debts, all to force his compliance on the plan involving me. And when your medical condition presented an unexpected opportunity, the pressure intensified. Your surgery created a perfect scenario. David could access your finances, solve his debt problem, disappear with new identities we created, and you would be left without the resources to question what had happened. The clinical detachment with which she described this plan, the calculated exploitation of my health crisis, my husband's vulnerabilities, my patient's trust, made my skin crawl. Why are you telling me this now? Katerina set down her cup precisely. Because the plan has evolved. Alexei's arrest creates an opportunity for realignment of priorities. Meaning what? Meaning I can offer you protection, real protection, not the limited security these police can provide. In exchange, you convince David to share what he knows about certain operational details with me, rather than the authorities. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. You want me to help the people who were planning to use me as an unwitting spy? The same people who manipulated my husband into stealing from me during surgery? I want to offer you a way out of a situation that will otherwise continue to escalate. Her tone remained matter of fact. David created fail-safes, insurance against betrayal, information stored securely that would activate if anything happened to him. The organization needs that information contained. So go talk to David yourself. He refuses to see me, but he's agreed to see you. Her gaze was unnervingly direct. The organization is willing to consider this matter closed if those fail-safes are neutralized. You get your life back. David potentially gets a reduced sentence through cooperation. I get what I need to satisfy my superiors. The offer was tempting in its simplicity, a clean resolution to the nightmare my life had become. But the professional, confidence in Katerina's expression told me she was accustomed to people accepting such deals, to leveraging fear and uncertainty to achieve her objectives. And if I refuse, then the organization continues its efforts to recover what it considers its investment in this operation. Your recovered funds, the information David possesses, the access you represent. She glanced briefly toward the lake. They are persistent, and they have resources that extend far beyond what you've seen so far. I took a slow breath, conscious of the wire recording our conversation, of Detective Larson watching intently from her table, of the critical importance of keeping Katerina talking. Let's say I'm interested. What exactly would I need to do? A hint of satisfaction crossed her features. Visit David. Convince him to reveal the location of his insurance files. Assure him that cooperation will result in protection for both of you. Then relay that information to me. And I'm supposed to trust that once you have what you want, you'll just leave us alone? Trust is irrelevant. This is business. The organization invests resources where they yield returns. Once the David Mitchell operation is no longer viable, resources will be redirected elsewhere. I'd need time to think about it. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, the offer expires. She slid a burner phone across the table. My number is the only one programmed. Call when you decide. As she rose to leave, I ventured one final question, the one that had haunted me since discovering David's betrayal. Was any of it real? Between you and him? Katerina paused, something flickering briefly across her composed features. That's a question for David, not me. Then she was gone, moving gracefully through the cafe and disappearing into a black sedan waiting outside. I remained seated, processing the conversation while Detective Larson approached, sliding into Katerina's vacated chair. We got everything, she confirmed quietly, including vehicle details. Officers are following at a distance. She wants me to help them contain whatever insurance files David created, I summarized, in exchange for being left alone. Classic plea bargain approach, Detective Larson observed, but with no legal enforceability and no reason to trust their word. What would you do? I asked, suddenly exhausted by the weight of impossible choices. She considered the question. Seriously. Professionally, I'd say use the meeting with David to gather intelligence on these insurance files. They could be critical evidence. Personally, she hesitated, I'd be very careful about getting pulled deeper into their world, even with promises of resolution. As we left the cafe, surveillance teams continuing to track Katerina's vehicle, I found myself more conflicted than ever. The meeting had provided crucial context about why I'd been targeted, but it had also expanded the threat beyond anything I'd initially understood. Whatever David had meant about our wedding rings, I needed to find them, now. Back at the cabin, Detective Larson was organizing a search for our anniversary rings. If they're as important as David suggested, Volov's people will be looking for them too. We need to find them first. They could be anywhere, I said, frustration edging my voice. David cleaned out our safe deposit box before my surgery. They weren't at the house when we checked. What about the jewelry box he returned to you during your meeting at the house? The one with your grandmother's ring and mother's locket? I hadn't even thought to check there, assuming David had separated our wedding rings from my family heirlooms. The velvet pouch was still in my bag, untouched since that confrontation that had ended with Alexi's arrest. When I emptied the pouch onto the table, there were indeed more items than I remembered. My grandmother's antique diamond ring, my mother's silver locket, a pair of pearl earrings David had given me for our 5th anniversary, and, nestled among them, our custom platinum bands. "He put them with my family jewelry," I murmured, picking up the larger band, David's. It was heavier than a normal ring, with an unusual channel design running around the inner circumference. Detective Larson examined my smaller band. "These don't look like typical wedding rings. They were custom designed for our 10th anniversary 2 years ago. David was insistent about certain design elements that seemed purely aesthetic at the time." She turned the ring, studying the interior. "Channel. This could be a data storage component. I've seen similar technology, micro SD storage embedded in everyday objects. We should get these to our tech team immediately." While waiting to hear back from the technical analysts, I called Marcus, David's colleague who was supposedly a federal informant. Detective Larson arranged the call through secure channels, monitoring on another line. "Sarah?" Marcus sounded genuinely relieved when he answered. "Thank God. I've been trying to figure out how to reach you safely." David told me. "To contact you," I said cautiously. "He mentioned an offshore account?" "Yes, and more." His voice lowered. "I can't discuss details over the phone. We need to meet in person, somewhere secure." "The federal building downtown?" "No. Too many eyes, too many ears. Not everyone there can be trusted." The echo of David's warning sent a chill through me. "There's a bookstore on Maple Street, Henderson's. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Look for me in the history section." After hanging up, Detective Larson shook her head. "I don't like it. Even confirmed informants can be compromised, and meeting outside a secure location. But you'll have surveillance on the bookstore?" "Of course. Every entrance, every approach." She seemed distracted, checking her phone frequently. Finally, it rang, and she stepped outside to take the call. When she returned, her expression had changed, more intense, focused. "The technical team found something in the rings. They contain embedded microSD storage with encrypted files. The encryption is sophisticated. They need both rings together to access the complete key." "What's on them?" "They're still working on it, but preliminary analysis suggests comprehensive documentation, financial transactions, communications, identity records, everything David claimed he had as insurance against Volov's organization. It was the confirmation I'd been both hoping for and dreading. If the rings contained what David claimed, it meant parts of his story were true. But it also meant I was now in possession of information that dangerous people desperately wanted contained. What happens now? We need to secure these files properly, analyze their contents. If they're as comprehensive as they appear, they could be the key to dismantling Volov's entire network, not just the immediate players we've identified. My mind went to Katerina's proposition, her offer of protection in exchange for containing these very files. "Katerina's deadline is tomorrow morning. She expects me to call." "Let her deadline pass," Detective Larson advised. "Once we understand exactly what's in those files, we'll have a better negotiating position if needed." That night, I found it impossible to sleep. Every noise from the surrounding woods set my nerves on edge. The weight of decisions pressed down on me, whether to meet Marcus, how to respond to Katerina, what to do with the evidence in the rings. The fact that David had hidden such crucial information in our anniversary bands felt significant, though I couldn't articulate exactly why. Morning dawned clear and cold. Detective Larson arrived early, accompanied by a different officer, not Rivera, who had been with me since the beginning of this ordeal. "Where's Officer Rivera?" I asked. "Reassigned," she said tersely. "Security precaution. We're rotating all personnel on your detail to minimize predictability and potential compromise." It made sense, but Rivera's absence felt unsettling nonetheless. I'd grown accustomed to his steady presence. We drove to Henderson's bookstore in silence. The new officer, Collins, scanning the surroundings with military precision. "Detective," Larson briefed me one final time before I entered. "We have plainclothes officers throughout the store. I'll be at the coffee counter near the front. Remember, if anything feels wrong, headache," I finished. "I know." The bookstore was quiet. Just a few morning customers browsing shelves or sipping coffee. I made my way to the history section at the back, pretending to examine titles while watching for Marcus. At precisely 10 a.m., a figure appeared at the end of the aisle. "Third shelf, Civil War section," Marcus said quietly, not making eye contact. "The blue book with gold lettering. Take it to the reading area." Without waiting for my response, he moved to a different section. I found the book he'd indicated, a thick volume on Gettysburg, and carried it to a secluded corner with armchairs. When I opened it, there was a sealed envelope inside. Marcus appeared a few minutes later, sitting in the adjacent chair. "Don't open that here," he murmured, pretending to read a magazine. "It contains account access information, security codes, and contact protocols. David arranged everything before your surgery. Contingency plans if things went wrong." "The offshore account he mentioned?" Marcus nodded slightly. "Almost $400,000. He's been diverting funds from his payments from Volov for months, preparing an escape fund for you. There's also access information for secure servers where he stored additional evidence." Why didn't he tell me any of this? Before my surgery? He couldn't risk it. They were watching both of you by then. The plan was for me to contact you after your recovery, once David had established a secure location. But then everything accelerated when the bank froze the transfers. Did you know what he was planning? The theft during my surgery? Marcus glanced around cautiously before answering. Not the specifics. I knew he was planning to disappear, that he was under pressure from Volov's people. I tried to convince him to work with federal authorities instead, but he was afraid for your safety. He hesitated. He really thought he was protecting you, Sarah. The sincerity in his voice made me want to believe him, but caution prevailed. How do I know this isn't another manipulation? You don't. His honesty was refreshing. But think about it. If David were solely focused on saving himself, why create an offshore account for you? Why document everything so meticulously? Why risk hiding the evidence in something as personal as your wedding rings? Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. A text message from Detective Larson. "Exit now. Security compromised." I stood immediately, sliding the book with its concealed envelope into my bag. "I have to go." Marcus nodded, understanding without explanation. "Be careful who you trust, Sarah, even those who seem to be helping you." As I made my way toward the front of the store, I spotted Detective Larson at the coffee counter, her posture tense as she scanned the room. She gave a slight nod toward the door, and I moved in that direction. Outside, Officer Collins was waiting with the car, engine running. "Get in," he ordered tersely. "What happened?" I asked as we pulled away from the curb. "Potential security breach," Detective Larson explained, glancing back through the rear window. "One of our surveillance teams spotted a known associate of Volov's approaching the bookstore." The drive back to the cabin was tense, with frequent route changes and careful monitoring for any vehicles that might be following. Once inside, Detective Larson instructed Officer Collins to secure the perimeter while she debriefed me. "What did Marcus give you?" she asked as soon as we were alone. I hesitated, remembering his warning about being careful who I trusted. But Detective Larson had been my lifeline throughout this nightmare, the one consistent source of protection and information. "An envelope," I said, removing it from my bag, supposedly containing access information for an offshore account David set up for me, plus other evidence he's gathered. She took the envelope, examining the seal. "We should verify this information before you access anything. It could be another trap." Just then, her phone rang. She checked the caller ID, frowning slightly. I need to take this. Excuse me. As she stepped outside to take the call, I found myself staring at the envelope on the table. What if Marcus was right? What if even those who seemed to be helping me couldn't be fully trusted? The uncertainty was paralyzing. Detective Larson returned, her expression grave. That was the technical team. They've broken the encryption on the Ring files. And? It's more extensive than we initially thought. Financial records dating back 3 years, communications between high-level members of Volov's organization, evidence of bribes to officials in multiple jurisdictions. She sat down heavily, including payments to someone within our department. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Someone on the police force is working with them? It appears so. The files don't explicitly name the individual, but they reference a resource with access to case information, assignment details, security protocols. The implications were staggering. Anyone could be compromised, even someone on my protection detail. There's something else, she continued. Your name appears in communications dating back almost a year. They identified you as a potential asset because of your patient list long before David became directly involved. They've been watching you, gathering information, looking for leverage. Through David. Initially, yes. But these records suggest they had other sources as well. Your office manager appears to have been providing information about your schedule, your patients, your routines. Carol, my office manager of 5 years. The betrayal stung, another layer of violation in an ever-deepening well of deception. What do we do now? Detective Larson's gaze was steady. We use this information to build a comprehensive case. With what's in these files, combined with Katerina's statements to you at the cafe, we have enough to pursue charges against multiple members of the organization. And David? His cooperation will be taken into consideration. He's still facing serious charges, but this evidence supports parts of his story. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Unknown number. Deadline passed. Decision made for you. Watch the sister. Cold dread washed over me. They're threatening Jen. Detective Larson took the phone, reading the message. We need to get your sister to a secure location immediately. She dialed a number, speaking rapidly to someone about protective custody arrangements for Jen. As she talked, I opened my laptop, navigating to the security camera feed I'd set up at Jen's apartment after everything began. A precaution that had seemed excessive at the time, but now felt prescient. The feed showed Jen's living room, empty. Kitchen, empty. Then movement near the front door, a figure in dark clothing entering with what appeared to be a key. Not Jen. Someone's in her apartment. I interrupted Detective Larson's call. Right now, an intruder. She moved quickly to look at the screen, then barked orders into the phone about an active threat situation. Officers are on their way, she assured me. They're less than 5 minutes from her location. We watched tensely as the intruder methodically searched the apartment, checking drawers, looking under furniture. Not a random burglar. This was a targeted search. They're looking for something specific, Detective Larson observed. Possibly. Information they think Jen might have about you or the files. The intruder paused, head tilting slightly as if listening, then quickly moved toward the door. Seconds later, Jen appeared on the screen, returning home, completely unaware of the danger she'd narrowly missed. Call her, Detective Larson urged. Tell her to get out of there immediately. Say there's a gas leak, anything to make her leave without raising suspicion. I dialed with shaking fingers. When Jen answered, I forced my voice to remain calm. Jen, listen carefully. I just got a call from your building manager. There's a gas leak in your section of the building. You need to leave right now. Don't pack. Anything. Just go. There are emergency workers outside who will help you. To her credit, Jen didn't question the strange instructions. Okay, I'm leaving now. She hung up, and we watched on the camera feed as she immediately turned and exited the apartment. Detective Larson was already on her phone again. Our officers will intercept her outside, bring her to a safe location. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by renewed fear. The threat was escalating, expanding to include those I loved. This wasn't going to end until Volov's organization either retrieved their information or was dismantled. "I want to see David again," I said firmly. "Now that we know what's in the rings, I need to understand exactly what he knows about their plans, about who's compromised, about how to end this." Detective Larson nodded. "I'll arrange it. But Sarah," her expression turned serious. "Until we identify the leak in our department, you need to be extremely careful about what information you share and with whom. That includes me." "I don't understand." "I'm not asking you to distrust me," she clarified. "I'm telling you that operational security requires compartmentalization now. The fewer people who know your exact plans, your exact location, the safer you'll be." As she made arrangements for another meeting with David, I opened the envelope Marcus had given me. Inside were account details for a Cayman Islands bank, access codes for a secure cloud storage service, and a handwritten note from David. "Sarah, if you're reading this, things haven't gone according to plan. The account contains enough to support you through recovery and beyond. The cloud storage holds duplicates of everything I've gathered as insurance. Access it only as a last resort. Trust few people. I'm sorry for everything. I love you. David." The evidence was mounting that at least parts of David's story were true. He had indeed created contingency plans to provide for me, had been gathering evidence against Volov's organization for months. But the fundamental betrayal remained. He had still chosen to deal with dangerous criminals rather than coming to me when problems first arose, had still planned to disappear during my surgery, had still initiated an affair with Katerina regardless of her motivations or his. Understanding the context didn't erase the pain, but it did complicate the simple narrative of betrayal that had dominated my thoughts since waking from surgery to find him gone. As darkness fell over the cabin, I stared out at the moonlit lake, weighing impossible choices. Meet with David again, risking further manipulation? Access the offshore account, potentially revealing my knowledge to people monitoring financial activity? Use the evidence from the rings to go after Volov's organization directly, escalating a conflict with people who had already demonstrated their reach and ruthlessness? The offshore account was tempting, financial security after days of uncertainty. But something held me back. Accepting that money felt like accepting David's version of events, his framing of his actions as ultimately protective rather than self-serving. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Detective Larson. "Meeting arranged. Federal Building, 9 a.m. tomorrow. New security protocols in place. Tomorrow, then. One more conversation with the stranger who had been my husband. One more chance to understand the truth before deciding how to proceed. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind cycling through fragments of conversations, clues, and contradictions. By dawn, I was sitting on the cabin's small deck, watching mist rise from the lake, a growing certainty settling in my chest. I needed to make decisions based on facts, not emotions or manipulations. From David, from Katerina, even from well-intentioned law enforcement. The precautions for my second meeting with David were even more stringent than before. Different vehicle, different route, different entrance to the federal building. Detective Larson insisted on these changes, explaining that the compromised officer in their department necessitated extreme operational security. "We don't know how high this goes," she said as we drove through morning traffic. "The evidence in the rings suggests connections to federal agencies as well." "Do you think David knows who the compromised officers are?" I asked. "If he does, that information would be extremely valuable. But approach carefully. Even in custody, he may have reasons to withhold certain details." The meeting room was smaller than before, with a single table and no observation window. David was already seated when I entered, looking marginally better than during our previous encounter, less haggard, more focused. The prison jumpsuit remained, as did the handcuffs secured to the table ring, but his posture had straightened, his eyes clearer. "You found the rings," he said immediately, studying my face. I nodded, taking the seat across from him. "The technical team broke the encryption. They've accessed the files." Relief visibly washed over him. "Thank God. Then you know I was telling the truth. About the evidence, about trying to protect you." "I know parts of your story check out," I clarified, unwilling to grant him complete absolution. "The offshore account exists. Marcus confirmed your arrangements. The rings contain extensive documentation on Volov's network. And the threats? Have they contacted you since I've been in custody?" Katerina reached out. "She's offering protection in exchange for containing your evidence. And yesterday, they sent a threat regarding Jen. Someone broke into her apartment." Alarm flashed across his face. "Is she safe?" "For now. Police intercepted her before anything happened. She's in protective custody." David leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "Listen carefully, Sarah. They're escalating because they're desperate. The files in those rings include evidence of operations across multiple countries, bribery of officials, identities of their entire leadership structure. Combined with the server data I secured separately, it's enough to dismantle their entire organization." "The server data that you arranged for Marcus to tell me about?" He nodded. "Backup insurance. I couldn't risk keeping everything in one place." "Why not just turn all this over to authorities from the beginning? Why the elaborate schemes, the offshore accounts, the secrets?" His expression darkened. "Because their reach extends into the very agencies that should be stopping them. The files identify at least 3 FBI agents, 2 assistant district attorneys, and multiple police officers in their pocket. I thought of Detective Larson's confirmation that they'd found evidence of a compromised officer. The leak in the police department. It's more than a leak. It's systematic infiltration. They target people with vulnerabilities, gambling debts, sick family members, compromising secrets, and leverage them for information and influence." The tactics sounded familiar. Exactly what they'd done to David himself. "How do I know which authorities to trust, then?" "There's a federal task force, specially assembled to investigate high-level corruption. Very limited membership, extreme compartmentalization. Marcus can connect you with the lead agent, a woman named Eleanor Chen. She's been vetted extensively, as has her direct team." I made a mental note of the name. "And the immediate threat? Katerina's deadline has passed. They've already shown they're willing to target Jen." "They won't stop with Jen," he warned. "Anyone connected to you becomes leverage. That's why I created the exit strategy. New identities, offshore funds, complete disconnect from our previous lives. Your solution was to run away rather than face the problem." Pain flashed across his face. "I thought I was protecting you. I couldn't see another way out that didn't put you directly in their crosshairs. And Katerina? Was sleeping with her part of your protection strategy too?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That complicated everything. It wasn't supposed to happen." "But it did." "Yes. No excuses, no justifications, just acknowledgement." "It did." The simple admission hung between us, a fact neither of us could change or erase. "What would you do now?" I asked, genuinely curious. "If you were in my position, with the evidence, the offshore account, the threats, what would your next move be?" He considered the question carefully. "I would make contact with Agent Chen through Marcus, turn over all the evidence, the ring files, the server data, everything. Request formal witness protection, not just for you, but for Jen and anyone else they might target. Then," he hesitated, "I would access the offshore account and create distance. Go somewhere they wouldn't expect, somewhere not connected to either of us, until the case is fully prosecuted. Run away, in other words. Strategic retreat, he corrected. Temporary, until the threat is neutralized. And you? Where do you fit in this scenario? His eyes met mine directly. I don't. I made my choices, Sarah. Now I have to live with the consequences. The resignation in his voice seemed genuine, a far cry from the manipulative tactics I'd feared. There's something I still don't understand, I said after a moment. If you were gathering evidence against them all along, planning contingencies, why go through with the transfer during my surgery at all? Why not just take the evidence to authorities before things reached that point? The timing wasn't my choice. They accelerated everything when your surgery was scheduled. Suddenly, there was pressure to act immediately, threats more explicit than before. His voice dropped lower. They made it clear that if I didn't follow through, your recovery might encounter complications. The implication sent ice through my veins. They threatened to harm me during recovery. He nodded grimly. I believed them. That's why I had to make it look convincing. The transfer. The disappearance. If they thought I'd double-crossed them while you were still vulnerable in the hospital. Horrible logic emerged. A distorted version of protection that involved apparent betrayal. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it provided context I hadn't fully understood before. One last question, I said, gathering myself. Was any of it real? Us? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like 15 years of lies. Not lies, he said quietly. Compartmentalization. The man who loved you, who built a life with you, that was real. The decisions I made, especially this past year, came from a place of trying to protect that life, however misguided those decisions were. The guard appeared at the door, signaling our time was nearly up. Sarah, David said urgently, as I prepared to leave. Whatever you decide to do, be careful. Trust your instincts about people. They've been right more often than you know. Outside the interview room, Detective Larson was waiting. Productive conversation? He provided a name, I said, watching. Her reaction carefully. An FBI agent leading a task force on corruption, Eleanor Chen. If Detective Larson was compromised, this information would trigger some response. But her expression showed only thoughtful consideration. I know Chen by reputation. Impressive record. Specializes in internal corruption cases. I can arrange contact if you think it would be helpful. I'd like to verify her credentials first, I said cautiously. Through Marcus, if possible. She nodded, seemingly unsurprised by my hesitation. Reasonable precaution. We'll set it up. On the drive back toward the cabin, I found myself studying Detective Larson more carefully than before. She had been my rock throughout this ordeal, consistently protective and forthcoming. But David's warnings about infiltration at multiple levels of law enforcement lingered. Something on your mind? She asked, noticing my scrutiny. Just processing everything, David shared. It's a lot to take in. I can imagine. Learning that people you trusted have hidden lives, secret agendas, it challenges your entire sense of reality. She pulled onto a scenic overlook, cutting the engine. Before we return to the cabin, there's something you should know. The technical team completed their full analysis of the ring files this morning, and they found something unexpected. References to an operation called Phoenix Protocol, apparently a contingency plan if Volov is ever arrested. It includes a list of targets for immediate elimination to prevent testimony or evidence from being used. Your name is on that list. My stomach dropped. Immediate elimination? It's a worst-case scenario for them, activated only if the organization feels existentially threatened, which, with the evidence you now possess, they might. What does this mean practically? It means we need to move you to a more secure location. The cabin was sufficient as a temporary measure, but if they've activated Phoenix Protocol, it won't be enough. something in her phrasing triggered a warning bell. The ring files had been decrypted only yesterday. How would Volov's organization know about the evidence I now possessed unless someone had told them? When was this protocol activated? I asked, keeping my voice casual. We're not certain, but intelligence suggests within the last 24 hours. Another warning flag. How would they have this intelligence so quickly? I see, I said, turning to look out the window while my mind raced. What location did you have in mind? There's a safe house in the mountains. Very isolated, extremely secure. We can move you there immediately. Mountain isolation. Perfect for someone to disappear without witnesses. I remembered David's parting words. Trust your instincts about people. Actually, I said, turning back to her, I'd like to speak with Agent Chen first, before relocating. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed her face before her professional mask returned. That can be arranged, but security should be our priority. The safe house has communication capabilities. I understand. But I'd prefer to make that contact before moving again. After everything that's happened, I need to feel I'm making informed choices about my next steps. She studied me for a long moment before nodding. I'll see what I can arrange. Let's get back to the cabin for now. As we pulled back onto the road, I felt the weight of the burner phone Katarina had given me in my jacket pocket. I hadn't disposed of it, though I'd told Detective Larson I had. A contingency of my own, though I hadn't been sure why I kept it until now. Back at the cabin, Detective Larson made several calls, ostensibly arranging my meeting with Agent Chen. I excused myself to take a shower, and once alone in the bathroom with the water running, I retrieved the burner phone from my hiding place in the lining of my toiletry bag. I typed a simple message. Need verification. Is Detective Larson part of your organization? The response came almost immediately. Yes, mid-level asset, financial pressure points, recently promoted to handling your case directly. Cold certainty settled in my stomach. I'd been under the protection of one of Volov's assets all along. I sent one more message. Phoenix Protocol activated? Yes, your elimination authorized. Suggest cooperation instead. Still open to arrangement discussed previously. The diner was sparsely populated, a few locals lingering over coffee, a waitress wiping down counters. I chose a booth in the back corner with a clear view of both the entrance and the rear exit, ordering coffee to justify my presence while I planned my next move. First priority, secure communication. My own phone remained off to prevent tracking. The diner had a payphone near the restrooms, ancient technology now serving as my safest option. I approached the counter, asking for change. Is there a motel nearby? My car broke down and I might need to stay overnight. Pine Tree Lodge, about half a mile up the road, the waitress offered. Nothing fancy, but clean enough. Armed with quarters, I made my way to the payphone, grateful that I'd memorized Marcus's number from the documents he'd provided. The phone rang 4 times before he answered cautiously. "It's Sarah," I said without preamble. "I need to meet. Not where we planned. I've been compromised." A brief silence then. "The Sheffield Public Library. 1 hour. Reference section." "How? Will I know the library is secure?" "Look for a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird on the return cart. If it's there, proceed. If not, the location isn't safe." The call ended. I made a second call to Jen's cell phone, relieved when she answered immediately. "Sarah? Where are you? Detective Larson called saying you'd disappeared from protective custody." "Listen carefully." I kept my voice low. "Larson is compromised. She works for them. Don't tell her or anyone with her where you are. Trust no one." "From the police department?" "Oh my God." Jen's voice shook. "What do I do? Are you in official protective custody or just staying with someone from the department?" Officer Walsh drove me to a hotel. He's stationed outside my door. "Leave immediately. Say you're getting ice or something, then use the stairs, not the elevator. Get to a public place with lots of people, then call this number." I recited the contact information for Marcus that I'd memorized. "Tell him you're my sister and need extraction." "Sarah, you're scaring me." "I know, and I'm sorry. But this is life or death, Jen, for both of us." After Jen promised to follow my instructions, I made one final call to the offshore account's secure line, verifying the access codes David had established. The automated system confirmed a balance of $387,654, exactly as he'd claimed. I arranged for a transfer of $10,000 to be available for cash pickup at a local financial service office, using the password system outlined in his documentation. With immediate communication handled, I left the diner and walked quickly toward the library, staying on main streets while continuously scanning for any sign of pursuit. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape was fading, replaced by a hypervigilant focus that cataloged every passing car, every stranger's glance. The Sheffield Public Library was a modest brick building on the town's main street. Inside, the elderly librarian barely looked up from her book as I entered. I moved casually toward the reference section, noting with relief the copy of To Kill a Mockingbird prominently displayed on the return cart. The reference area was empty save for a middle-aged woman in a cardigan who I recognized immediately as not being Marcus. I retreated to the adjacent periodicals section, pretending to browse magazines while watching the entrance. 10 minutes later, Marcus appeared, accompanied by a trim Asian-American woman in her 40s wearing a no-nonsense pantsuit. They spotted me immediately but gave no obvious acknowledgement, instead heading directly to a study room at the back of the reference section. I waited 30 seconds, then followed. "Security measures," the woman said as I entered the small room. "Standard. Procedure." She held up a device that looked like a bulky smartphone, scanning the room systematically. "Clean. No surveillance devices." She extended her hand. "Eleanor Chen, FBI Corruption Task Force." She showed me her credentials, which I examined carefully. "How do I know these are legitimate?" "You don't," she acknowledged. "Just as I don't. Know if you're actually Sarah Mitchell or someone sent to compromise this operation," Marcus intervened. "We need to establish mutual trust quickly. Time is critical." He turned to me. The offshore account David established, what's the name of the financial institution? First Cayman Trust, account designation Windward Shield. Transition options. Potentially scaling back some of the more restrictive aspects of the protection program. Perhaps eventually a path back to your original identity, if you wanted that. I considered this possibility, surprised to find it didn't immediately appeal to me. I'm not sure I do want that. Sarah Mitchell belongs to a life that doesn't exist anymore. Marcus nodded, understanding. Identity is fluid. Sometimes what we build after devastation suits us better than what came before. Speaking from experience, he smiled faintly. Long before I became an informant, I had another life too. One that imploded through choices not entirely my own. The rebuilding process taught me things about myself I might never have discovered otherwise. After dinner, I walked along the Boston waterfront, watching lights reflect off the harbor. My phone vibrated with a text notification, an update from the automated system I'd established to track David's case. Status change. Mitchell, David. Transfer approved to minimum security facility. Eligibility for work release program reviewed. Progress. In his journey, as I was making progress in mine, parallel paths that would never converge again, but perhaps both leading toward something constructive. Back in my apartment, I opened the small box where I kept the few mementos I'd brought from my previous life. My mother's locket, my grandmother's ring, a handful of photos carefully selected to exclude David while preserving family memories. Among them lay my original wedding ring, removed from my pocket after that final meeting and placed here rather than discarded. Not worn, not displayed, but preserved as an artifact of history, a reminder of both what had been lost and what had been survived. I closed the box, returning it to its drawer before preparing for bed. Tomorrow would bring new patience, new challenges, new opportunities to build this life I was creating piece by piece. Not the life I had planned or expected, but increasingly one that felt authentically mine. The betrayal that had shattered my world had also, paradoxically, freed me to reconstruct it according to my own design. The theft that had temporarily stripped me of financial security had ultimately led to resources that were unquestionably mine alone. The surgery that had made me vulnerable had healed my body, even as the crisis that followed had tempered my spirit. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about David's words from our final meeting. I believe broken things can sometimes be rebuilt into something different but valuable. Not the same, never perfect, but purposeful. In the darkness of my new bedroom, in this city where no one knew my real history, I acknowledged the truth in that statement. The breaking had been real. The pain had been genuine. The betrayal remained, a fact that could never be erased or fully excused. But the rebuilding was real, too. Day by day, choice by choice, I was creating a life with purpose, with meaning, with possibilities still unfolding. Not despite what had happened, but in part because of it. Not the same, never perfect, but mine. Wholly, completely mine.